Commissioner Bolio. On Sunday, I got an email from Senator Kitchell saying that they were putting the link up to this year's taxes on to the fast track bill. And I missed that. She wanted to know if our committee was okay with it. And I said, well, you know, we'd heard the issue. Health and Welfare ran long and I was late getting to money chairs last week, which may have been where this got mentioned. And there was some meeting that Senator Pearson covered on Friday, but that was supposed to be for broadband.
It was
So
only
I don't know
broadband.
where I missed it, but I did. So I'm going to give you just a heads up that we're going to talk about that when Commissioner Bolio comes in, because apparently there's new federal changes that would take some changes in what's in, I think it's 315, the CRF fast track. So invited him in early. But the first thing we do have up is the Vermont Interstate Nurse Licensure Compact. And we went through that. Lauren Hibbert was here and we asked her to go back out while I talked to you guys. But she, you know, we'll get her back in if there are questions. This is pretty much the we're in it, we're out of it. We're going to lose $600,000 to $1 million over a couple of years, but there'll also be changes in who we've got to regulate and, you know, the number of nurses under Vermont licensure. We are now into the minority of states who hasn't done this. We passed it last year. It has come out unanimously, I believe, from Health and Welfare for the second time. So committee, what do you want to do?
Okay.
Senator Brock, was that a motion? You're muted.
The thumbs up. That is a motion to adopt, Madam Chair.
Okay, so Senator Brock has moved that we adopt S48 as presented. That's with the amendment from Health and Welfare that just said if they're going to commit more than $100,000, you know, of state debt obligation, that they have to inform the Commissioner of Finance so that somebody in the state knows what's going on. No one thinks that's going to happen in the near future, but just in case. Okay, further discussion, Senator Bray.
I think this question might go to Senator Pearson. Was it on S48 that we were talking about impacts, possible impacts of concern to nurses already in Vermont as a labor issue? And I don't know if you've had any further chance to look into that and if you have any further thoughts about it. I know when I was in government ops, we generally moved in this direction to create opportunities for more people to come to Vermont. But I don't know if you have any further thoughts.
I don't have a lot of thoughts. I just pointed out that the nurses union, which is some 2,000 nurses, through their union at UVMMC had opposed this. I did get a signal from them that, you know, they do know we're moving here in this direction. The challenge at the hospital is they're understaffed and they're dependent on travelers, and you know, you could see how it's demoralizing to be working next to somebody that doesn't know the community at all and is getting paid a boatload more than you are. And that's the dynamic. Now, I'm not sure, you might argue this bill makes it easier to have travelers in, but I don't think the hospital is motivated to have travelers. They got to hit safe staffing levels and stuff. So it's not a good answer. I don't have I know the union is opposed to it. It's tricky for me. They've always supported me, but they're not presenting an alternative, certainly.
I just wanted to thank you. I just wanted to check back in.
We did have the union reps into health and welfare. And it probably isn't going to make it easier because the traveling businesses pay the fee and move you in and pay you a housing stipend and all kinds of other stuff. We've heard pre-tax. And as long as there's a nursing shortage, they're going to be able to do that. If our folks, it'll make it easier for our folks to go work somewhere else, but keep their connection to Vermont. They will be a Vermont licensed nurse, and they don't have to choose to end their Vermont license and go get licensed in California or Kansas or somewhere else where they then develop a bond with that state. That's all I can think of.
Thank you.
Okay. Senator McDonald.
Yeah, technical question, are we moving, did Senator Brock move to approve the bill as recommended by Health and Welfare, or are we adding anything to it?
No, we're not adding anything to it.
And it's a committee bill out of Health and Welfare? No, it's not.
No.
It says- Okay.
It
So
is
move to
S48.
approve when amended as recommended by Health and Welfare.
It is moved to approve as presented to us. It was amended in health and welfare.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Hearing no nos, that looks like 700. So thank you. And Senator Hardy, you'll report that?
Yep, I'm emailing everybody now, Bloomer, et cetera, to
Okay.
get it going.
And tell Bloomer that you're gonna be the reporter from Health and Welfare.
Yep. will
I
do.
sent that bill up to him. And then I won't have to worry. I'm planning on being on the floor, but if I can't, I know that bill is done.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm not going to pass off the insurance bill to anyone, but if I'm not there, we'll just ask to pass that over and have that done. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you very much, committee. I appreciate your time.
Okay. So now we're going to go to Commissioner Bolio, who was originally coming in for his confirmation. This is just our chance to interview him. We don't usually, do any voting, approve or not approve, but this is your interview with us. But first you wanted to talk about the link up language. And I've already told the committee, I don't know how, but I missed the message that it was in, I guess it's 315. I thought it was in miscellaneous tax and headed to us there. But I know there's been a lot of concern in the business community about having filed their taxes and having, to file more, change taxes. And so Commissioner, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to try to help untangle all of this. Craig Bolio, Tax Commissioner, although maybe we should do the confirmation part first in case what I say here makes you guys think I shouldn't keep my job. So you'll remember we talked before about the annual federal link up to the Internal Revenue Code that the state of Vermont does every year. Vermont has what's known as static conformity, which means the legislature has to take action to link up to the federal code every year. It's not automatic. But Vermont does it retroactively. So right now in this legislative session, the legislature is talking about linking up to the 2020 tax year, which is what we just went through, which is what people are filing tax returns for now. So what that leads to every year is a weird situation where technically the laws of Vermont don't match the tax forms, but it's not normally an issue because there's not normally major retroactive federal tax legislation that's passed after the legislature adjourns. This year, there have been a number of instances of that. The one that we talked about before was the Paycheck Protection Program, where those loans are considered not taxable at the federal level and also allowed the deductions of expenses. The American Rescue Plan contains another retroactive tax provision that is significant. There are other tax provisions in the American Rescue Plan, but all of them that we have found, except the one I'm about to talk about, are forward-looking for tax year 21, which should give the legislature an opportunity to talk about those and think about those before linking up for 21. The one in the American Rescue Plan that is on my mind these days is the retroactive exclusion of up to $10,200 of unemployment compensation. It's excluded from federal taxation for anybody making less than $150,000 in 2020. And so we need to do something with this because as folks may remember from talking about this previously, Vermont tax forms start with adjusted gross income. Over the weekend, I think on Sunday afternoon or Sunday night, the IRS released guidance of how they are going to handle this exemption at the federal level. And it confirmed my expectation that it would be an above the line deduction, which means pre-AGI. So Vermont forms starting with AGI are again built to expect conformity on this issue. So at this point, if we choose not to conform, it is extremely challenging. We would be talking about stopping processing these returns for people who have received UI. We would be talking about changing tax forms to create an add back for that UI. And we would be talking about, for anybody who files between yesterday and the time that we get those programming changes in, either doing some kind of adjustment to their tax return or requiring amended returns. These are very similar points that I made before when I pleaded with the committee to please link up on the PPP issue. All of the same operational challenges will remain if the legislature chooses not to link up on the UI issue. For transparency, this is also somewhat of a challenge to link up to because we have received some tax returns from UI recipients already. And I checked those numbers this morning. I'm sure this committee is aware that the overall numbers of UI recipients in Vermont last year was about 100,000 unique individuals. That might translate to about 100,000 returns. Some may be married and filing together. Needless to say, we've only received about 20,000 of those. So the challenge that exists is that most people in that audience have not yet filed, and the forms are built to expect that to come out of adjusted gross income. But if the legislature chooses to link up, we will have to figure out something to do with those 20,000 who have already filed. And in fact, the IRS is trying to figure out what they should do for that audience. Interestingly, in the IRS guidance that came out over the weekend, they explicitly advise taxpayers not to file amended returns right now if they have already filed and had UI. That makes me think that there is a chance that they'll be talking about doing adjustments themselves. And frankly, our treatment or our guidance is very likely to mirror how the feds will handle it. It would be challenging for us to ask for amended returns if they don't, and it would be challenging. It would be likely that if the feds ask for amended returns, most folks would amend Vermont at the same time. The impact of this is in the range of 12.6 million. I would let JFO speak for themselves, but I believe that's a consensus estimate with tax and JFO at this point. It would be a one-time cost because this is a one-time tax provision, and it would hit fiscal year 21 mostly because it's the returns that we're talking about right now. What is uncertain, but I'm hopeful will help shoulder some of the cost of this is if we can use some of the provisions of the American Rescue Plan and the revenue replacement provisions to cover some of this. We're still analyzing that and talking with consultants and seeing if that would be a possible use of those funds. There are some questions on that. So I've said a lot. I'm happy to, I guess I should, the one other key point here that I need to make is, as the chair mentioned, H315 has the link up language for tax year 20, but very critically, it links up to the Internal Revenue Code through December 31st, 2020, which would mean passing that language would not bring in this UI provision. the language in that link up would need to be changed to link up through the Internal Revenue Code through March of 2021. I would note for the committee that doing that does not automatically mean that the committee or the legislature is agreeing to link up to other tax provisions for 2021, because the effective date on that bill that we pass every year says it only applies to a specific tax year. So that would mean that tax year 20 has the tax laws through March of 2021 if the legislature wishes to link up to that. And my bottom line message is the same as it was before, which is that I would advocate for linking up to this.
Okay. And right now, the bill that came out of the House has the link for 2020, but my understanding is 2021, maybe not, that we're gonna, as we have more time, look at. And we would have to, so if we move it to March, we've got one for business. This would kind of be the counterbalance for the individuals. Okay.
That's right.
So, and no matter what we do, it's going to be messy at some point with getting some, well, not for the folks that have already filed that were on unemployment. Those 20,000 will have to figure out something to do.
Yeah, it's sticky either way. I would say it's much stickier with the larger audience, which is those who have not filed, that we are about to expect conformity on. From my chair, operationally, it would be much easier to deal with linking up and helping get that additional refund or that additional credit to those who have already filed than it would be to not link up and change the behavior for everybody who's starting to file now.
Okay. All right, committee. Now, this provision will be in 315, I believe, the fast track bill, right? We don't have a bill, so this is advice and consent. So committee, advise, and do you or do you not consent?
I'm lost.
Senator Hardy.
I just have a question, which I think you may have already answered, but just to make sure. So what's in 315 links up for tax year 20, but you also are recommending we do additional language that would link us up through March of 2021 to capture the UI changes that have been made at the federal and state level. Is that correct?
Yeah, let me clarify something. So there's two parts to the link up every year. There's the tax year that we're talking about, and then there's also the date through which we're linking up to the Internal Revenue Code. So regardless of the date that the legislature sets on the link up, it's only for tax year 20. So whatever we're talking about in this discussion is not anything related to linking up for next year's taxes. So this would be tax year 20, but the second part of it is that the language in H315 says that Vermont will link up to the IRC for tax year 20 through 12/31/2020, which means it covers the CARES Act and it covers, I've forgotten the name of the second act, the one in December, but it doesn't count this one. So the language would have to say for tax year 20, Vermont links up through March 31st of 2021 to the IRC. And then that would pull in this UI provision as well. It would not automatically pull in all of the other stuff from the American Rescue Plan that's effective for 21. That would be a separate discussion when the legislature chooses to link up or decouple from certain provisions for tax year 21. Does that
Okay,
make
and
sense?
yeah, I think the reason that we have to put the language in that would capture this most recent federal bill is because there are retroactive provisions in it that go back to tax year 20. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've never seen this happen before. I mean, the reason that language is in there always is because they're never passing retroactive federal tax legislation after December 31st of a prior year. So that's why the language is what it is. To my knowledge, it's never created a problem, but it does here.
Okay, so you need us to recommend to approps, or you're asking us to recommend to approps that we modify the language to capture the first 3 years to catch all of this.
That would be my preference.
Okay,
Okay.
got it.
Committee. Senator Sirotkin.
I have to go to approps, but I'm fine with the commissioner's recommendation. At 2 o'clock, I need to be over there.
Okay.
Thank you.
And this bill is not in our committee, but we're, as a committee, considering as 7 senators to recommend something to appropriations. I'm asking this as the clerk.
Yes, no, there is no, the bill is not in committee. This provision was originally
Yep.
in the miscellaneous tax bill.
Yeah.
And it's been moved, I think, because of all the concerns about people filing.
I
Um,
understand. I just,
okay.
as a clerk.
Yeah, no,
I didn't-
there is
I didn't
no
want to
bill.
assume
There,
something
there
that was-
won't,
Yeah, yeah.
this is a poll. So we can drop an email over to approps and tell them yes, no, or maybe, but I think they want a yes or a no. I don't think that anyone is overly happy, but this is this is a unique situation. And no one's ever seen it work like this, so. Senator Bray.
It's also probably the best possible time for us financially to have to make such an adjustment.
Yes, because there is more money coming in. The revenue forecast has been doing well. Faith, have we got anybody from joint fiscal that could come over and talk to us maybe later?
About this issue?
Yeah,
Yes, let me check.
We've been
And then
working with Graham.
we can move on, but if you want to get, you know, some numbers in here, we'll get joint fiscal to come talk to us. Senator Bray?
Yeah, Commissioner Bolio, your numbers were very helpful. I don't know if you've put that, sorry, I don't know if I missed an email and you already have specified the financial implications of the changes already in writing.
I haven't put it in writing. I just know the number that we've come up with joint fiscal for this provision is 12.6 million for
Right.
fiscal for 21.
Okay, so maybe if you could just send the committee a memo, then we have it in writing. That's helpful too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
And what was the possible impact of the payroll protection?
I don't remember that offhand.
Okay.
I think it was in that neighborhood.
Why am I thinking
that
10
we've-
something, but
Yeah, we've still been working with Graham on that at JFO.
okay. All right. So committee. I have a note, Senator Sirotkin is okay. Is anybody not okay with this?
I'm not, but I'm going to do it anyway.
You're gonna do it anyway. Okay, good. I'm not seeing anyone else objecting, so I will let Senator Kitchell know that we're set. Okay, now we can go on to Commissioner Bolio's interview.
I
So
do have one
Commissioner,
other-
talk to us about if you still like this job and why you want to do it.
That's actually a very easy question to answer, Madam Chair. I love this job. I've worked for the tax department I'm probably coming up on 10 years now. I started as a temporary employee. So we hire seasonal temps every year in taxpayer services and revenue processing to help with tax season, just like we have for this year. And so I started in the taxpayer services section, answering phone calls from taxpayers, helping process tax returns. I did that for a season. I worked in the corporate section, corporate income tax examiner for a couple of years. I worked on the VTax project, our integrated tax system project for, I want to say about a year and a half as a business analyst, took over as the project manager for that for a couple of years and was VTax director for about a year. And then in December 2018, I was appointed deputy commissioner under Commissioner Sampson. And when he left the department in May of 19, I became acting commissioner and was officially appointed in December of 19. So I've had the real benefit and luxury of having a lot of different roles at the department. I think that has helped me be able to see different areas that we do well, that we could use improvement on. I think it's given me a lot of credibility with the staff who understand that I have been in it with them and understand what they're going through. That's paid a lot of dividends, especially during COVID, where a lot of my team not only changed how they do their work, right? 85% of us working remotely, but as this committee is very well aware, all of the grants that we took on meant that we changed the kind of work that we do, and in a significant way. Administering those grants took about a third of our 150 staff. So it was a lot of people doing stuff every day for months that they don't normally do. And there were no complaints. People just said, they put their head down and said, what do I need to do? Our mission is to serve Vermonters by collecting the proper amount of money in a timely and efficient manner. And I have really asked my staff to focus on those first 3 words, which is to serve Vermonters. And they have really answered the call and just done whatever they've had to, really focused on helping their neighbors, helping their community. And I think we've had an impact. So through this pandemic and just in general, there's no department I'd rather be associated with. I very much hope you decide I should keep my job.
Committee questions? Senator Bray.
Thanks, Commissioner Bolio. One note of appreciation. I think it's great that you came in from the responding to calls side of things. That experience of customer service, which is invaluable when you're no longer answering the phone necessarily every day for calls. So thanks for that. I do have a question. So looking forward, if someone said, what's on the horizon? What are your biggest challenges for the next year, 2, 3 years, something like that? What do you envision working on?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of immediate things that we have to handle, which are some implementations from legislative changes. So this committee probably remembers very well the renter credit reform that happened last year. That'll be significant, but is on the docket, and I think is just a really great reform that we all worked together to get through last year. We'll also be implementing the cannabis tax. And then as I look to the medium and longer term, there are a couple things that really stick out to me. And one is just uncertainty, right? I don't know what the new normal is going to look like in tax administration and in terms of working for state government once we get on the other side of this. But those are 2 really big questions that I think are important. One of the questions that we've been asking ourselves in terms of tax administration is how should and how can, for instance, our audit division change how they do things, right? We've traditionally had folks out in the field and some in the office. We've acquired more and more data than we've ever had before through the use of VTAX and finding better ways to utilize VTAX. So, there are changes that will come on that front. And I think that there will be changes in what it means to work for state government. Certainly, I won't make those in a vacuum. I know that those are the kind of questions that the administration is answering right now. I also look at retention as a really key piece for us. We do really complicated work. And I really care about providing the best government service in the entire state, which means I need really talented people and I need them to stick around, right? 10 years ago, the department, I think, was one of the older departments in state government. We had a lot of folks who were either eligible to retire or on the cusp of eligibility to retire. And I actually looked into this last year. We trend toward one of the younger ones now. But what that also means is, again, in a changing world and having a younger workforce, we've really got to focus on retention and engaging those folks. We have opportunities to do that, right? VTAX, when we partner it with our staff, creates a lot of opportunities. We have fewer clerical positions than we've ever had before, and that will continue to trend downward. And what that will open up is the opportunity for those folks or other folks to do more interesting, more meaningful, more value-add work. So that's really key to me. The 2 elements of my vision, other than providing the best government service in the state, is making tax the best place to work in state government. And that is right in the pocket of that recruitment and retention element that I think is so critical to us.
Great, thanks so much. One quick follow-up is just, do you anticipate that remote work will continue to be part of tax and state, well, I won't ask about all state government, tax for the foreseeable future?
Well, certainly the foreseeable future, I believe it's still through May that we've got the order. If you can work remotely, you should work remotely. I would also mention that there are elements of tax that have always been remote work. So we have field auditor staff that are that live all throughout the state. We have district advisors that help with municipal governments that live all throughout the state. So certainly that will continue. And then I'm just following the discussion and engaging with the administration on what are some of the wider answers for state government.
Thanks so much.
Sure.
Any other questions for the commissioner? Senator McDonald and then Senator Hardy.
So what did you do before you became a temp for the department? What was your background and training?
So I started fairly early in my career. I was early 20s when I started. So I had just jumped around to a number of jobs from college. I had worked some retail for a little bit. I had worked for the university. I had worked for the Census Bureau. So I wouldn't say that I had had a solid path before jumping in with the department. I've always appreciated the opportunity for public service. Those kind of things, working for government has always been attractive to me. So once I got my foot in the door, I refused to leave.
So what was your major in college?
I had a double major of economics and political science, but while I was working for the department I don't remember when I got my MBA as well.
Okay.
Curious. Thank you.
Thanks.
Senator Hardy, you had a question.
Yeah, I mean, Senators Bray and McDonald asked two of the questions I had in my mind, but my third one is you mentioned about retention. And I was just looking at the Department of Tax's website about employee satisfaction, and it looks like you're doing a great job there. Are you having a hard time recruiting people with the necessary skills? I know that there's a workforce shortage in so many areas. Are you seeing that in your area, or are you finding the people that you need?
I would say generally we're finding the people that we need. One thing that is part of our strategic plan that we've noted is that some of our titles may be either outdated or inconsistent with how others would look at it. For instance, like when we post a business analyst position, that gets a lot of applicants, but when we post a tax examiner position, that gets fewer applicants. And I suspect a lot of it is because people in other careers or other industries are not as familiar with that terminology. So it was one of the projects that we had online for 2020 that has been submarined by having to change direction for COVID, but still a project that I'd like to take on, which is just an analysis of the titles that we use at the department, researching other states, see what they use, and see if there are ways to more accurately align them or more perfectly align them with the types of titles that people might use in the private sector. But I would say overall, we've been successful. I'm very happy with the workforce that we've been able to recruit. That's
great. And is there anything that you need from us besides this language in 315?
That's my immediate worry. No, let me just say I appreciate the committee's willingness to cooperate on those kind of things. I mean, I think one of the things that I bring to the table is authenticity and credibility. When I tell you that something's hard to do, I promise you that I know what I'm talking about. And that is something that's really key to me because my team is tired, right? What happened last year, we extended tax season, and that was a good move, right? It was automatic in Vermont law, but it was necessary to help taxpayers navigate that. But it had the impact of dragging the tail of tax season. Normally, we get our big glut right now up through April 15th, and then we have a backlog to work through April, May, and June. And we sort of sprint towards the end of the fiscal year, and we sprint towards getting out property tax credits on July 1st. And then right as we get on the other side of the July 4th holiday, it's not that we have no work to do, but we feel like we can breathe, right? So extending the due date for tax season to July 15th meant that there wasn't really that opportunity to breathe, right? And in addition to that, all of the grants work that went out that continued all the way through December of last year, and now ramping up again. So, this is something that's been on my mind that I do know that folks have worked really hard. I think it's been very rewarding work for them, but there's no doubt about it. People are tired, and I want to be sensitive to that as we be really thoughtful about what kind of things do we want to change or not change at the last minute. So I've always appreciated the committee's willingness to listen on that and understand that I really am trying to speak authentically to the challenges that we would have with certain elements of this stuff.
Yeah, I think everyone's tired. Your staff, the entire state, everyone's tired.
Totally.
I totally understand that. I just want to tell a little brief story about you because I don't really know you that well. I'm new to the committee and been very impressed with you. And one thing I emailed the commissioner, one of my constituents wanted a paper copy of the tax forms, and she doesn't file online. She wanted to do it on paper and she couldn't find a paper copy because of COVID and everything being closed. And I emailed them, and 2 days later, she emailed me and said, I got it in the mail today. So even those little tiny details, I was impressed that you were able to take care of her so quickly. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that. That means we're hitting the mark on great government service, and all the credit goes to my staff on that one.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for all the work that your staff has done that isn't in their job description this year. And it sounds like we're going to tell Senator Kitchell that, she can go ahead with expanding that link up through March 31st. And hopefully next year will not be quite as interesting.
I think we're all hoping for that, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the time. I know that the tax department is not unique in having pulled off heroics this year. I know businesses, individuals, other state government has been doing that, but I sure have been proud of what we've been able to do. So appreciate the time to talk about that.
Senator McDonald, you had.
I wanted to add, Madam Chair, that tax commissioners, administrations have come and gone. But in the last, since this administration, we have not been surprised by the tax department's actions and then had to kind of clean up after them. It's one of been the most frustrating things about being on finance is to find that audits have been conducted and bills have been sent out, and then we have a big storm after that. And it's been it's been very easy working with you and your predecessor, and it's particularly the fact that it's easy to do it during very difficult times is special. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Happy to always be working together.
I would echo that. The relationship between this committee and the tax department has not always been smooth. And I, understand that there was also a certain amount of morale issues in the department. And it's good to see that your employee satisfaction is up, and definitely the relationship with the legislature is probably as good as it's ever going to be.
I'll take that.
Well, considering that you've got an administration of one party and a committee with the majority in another party, to say that we're getting along during highly stressful times, I think says a lot.
I agree. I've been very appreciative for that relationship. And just really briefly on the point of, employee satisfaction and morale, I do think we've come a long way on that. The other thing I would say is I very much recognize your work is never done on that, right? You can't just say, I have a great workplace culture, I'm going to move on to something else. So certainly I acknowledge there's more work to be done there, and keep striving for that, and engage with my staff, engage with my managers to try to find ways to keep improving on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
All right. Okay, we're going to move along. Commissioner Tierney is here. And again, this is her chance. Commissioner's been equally as busy this year. Her chance to tell us what it's been like and why do you want to continue in this job?
Well, to begin with, because you've all become the closest thing I have to a group of friends. So if I don't continue in the job, I lose my community of friends. I've spent an enormous amount of time with you folks over the last year. And I have to say, given the importance of the issues we've been working on, I have felt just immensely privileged to have this continuing contact with you and to be working on these things, because they've made such a difference to the lives of Vermonters. And I couldn't help but listen in on a bit of the conversation you had just now with my colleague, Commissioner Bolio. And I would agree with him that, that this work is primed to be doing. It's an absolute privilege, and the people we help really depend on us to know what to do in an emergency. And one of the revelations to me in the course of what we did last year was the degree to which this committee was able to be a partner in doing that work and to give guidance. And I hope that I have been acceptable to you in executing on that guidance, because I did not see that happening in other places in the country. And it made me very pleased to be in Vermont, where we have that kind of ability to work across the aisle and to work across the different branches of government to get things done for the people we serve. I sort of break my last 2-year tenure into pre-pandemic and post-pandemic activities. We were already quite busy before the pandemic, trying to get Vermont prepared for the advent of electric vehicles. There was just so much work that had to be done to get tariffs in place so that we know what to charge people if they're going to be relying on electricity to charge their cars, what to do with the regulatory status of charging infrastructure, what to do about revenue replacement for the transportation fund if folks are not buying gasoline like they used to. And all of these issues are cutting edge issues that absolutely have to be addressed, because we have another pressing issue on the horizon. It's not even on the horizon anymore, it's here, greenhouse gas reductions and the work that the department's doing as part of the Climate Council to get that done. And everything we did on electric vehicles to get the state ready goes right to that urgent policy issue of being able to facilitate beneficial electrification. And I'm not done with that work. The pandemic interrupted me for this past year, and it will continue to make demands on the department for sure. But when we do get to a place where we can say with some confidence that the pandemic has abated somewhat, there is a lot of exciting and complicated work that remains to be done in this space, and I really want to be a part of that. I can't say enough about my staff. I remember so clearly in the closing days of the session that we had last summer, where closing time was upon all of you and you needed to go home and we needed to get to work. There were just things that you needed to hand off to the department and say, can you do it? And I just had to trust and say, yes, we can. We've had a lot of experience in administering a variety of programs. Give us these mandates, we'll get it done. And my folks stepped up with absolutely no supplemental assistance from limited service positions or anything of the nature. And as a consequence, we were able to successfully implement the electric arrearages program that the legislature had the foresight to authorize. You were one of 2 legislatures in the nation that did that. And you can see from the relief that's been included in the most recent stimulus bill that the other 48 states wish they had, because the money's coming now, but the pain to people has been real all along. And Vermont put $8 million worth of relief out there on the street through my agency with people who did their day jobs as they did that programmatic work start to finish. Setting up the program, something we'd never done before, and getting it done with I think some flair and economy. On the connectivity side, we also were incredibly active. I know with at the very outset of the moratorium, the first thought we had was folks are going to be taken away from the way they ordinarily deal with some of the connectivity problems they have in Vermont. For instance, if you don't have good connection at home, you tend to access it at work. But when the governor sends you home in order to shelter in place, what do you do to get online? And so we immediately started thinking about things that could be done in the short term to close those gaps. And working hand in hand with you, we were able to do things like the line extension program, like the Wi-Fi hotspots, like the connectivity initiative builds, and found some pretty, how shall I put it, cutting edge ways of interpreting the Treasury regulations to get that job done. That was some of the most stimulating work I've ever done, terrifying in some respects. And it's not done. And I'd like to be around for what it takes to complete that. So that's principally what's motivating me to do the job and accept the appointment from the governor, subject to your advice and consent, of course. We also have this mission on top of emergency response and the work that we've been doing to prepare the regulatory landscape for beneficial electrification, and that is the climate council work that we have to do. And in that area, I think the legislature has been very clear about what it is looking for the council to provide. And what's become clear to me in the tenure that I've had on that council so far is we really need to elevate the role of telecommunications as a means of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We need to learn from the pandemic that it is possible for Vermonters to do more telecommuting. And with that, you can avoid rolling cars. And with that, you avoid creating emissions that are damaging to the environment. It's another cutting edge area that needs attention, and it needs a fusion of expertise. And I think that's where the department comes in, because for years we've regulated in both the energy sphere and the telecommunications sphere, but they've kind of been siloed. And now what you're seeing with an issue like greenhouse gas reduction is the convergence of those things and how one can influence and help the other. And I'm very keen to do that work. It also informs another emerging policy concept of energy equity, where if you're going to have a green grid and a modernized grid, it should be available for everybody, not just people who happen to be located in places where connectivity is good. And so I think that's going to be the next frontier for us, is to figure out how we make sure that all electric utility ratepayers in a given territory, for instance, have the ability to access the great new services that are being offered by their utilities. And to that end, I'm very pleased to point to just last week 2 tariffs that were approved at the PUC that the department had really advocated for. They are in GMP and BEC service territories to create a tariff for make-ready costs to make it easier for providers like CUDs and small internet service providers to build out in those territories to get to folks who have, no better than 4.1 access, for instance. Those tariffs are a direct response to the call to arms, so to speak, that I issued last April when the pandemic was just getting underway. And I said to the regulated utility community, what can you do to pitch in to help get emergency broadband out there and to improve Vermont's picture? That's one of many responses we had. Looking forward, in addition to working on energy equity and the work on the Climate Council, I'm very mindful that this committee in particular, as well as your corresponding committee in the House Energy Technology arena, have been proposing different versions of how to create an entity that will do Vermont's broadband policies with the federal funding that's now coming. And, it will remain for you to decide, and the governor, of course, as well, which version of a new incarnation of connectivity agency there will be. But whichever one you decide on, it's clear that my agency has a role to play in transitioning to that vehicle. And that's my commitment to you, that will be an effective and efficient transition. And I think given the continuity would be a good thing, given the several years that I've been in place leading up to that. I'd like to finish that work. I think this is probably a good time to stop and see what your questions are. I would just say one more thing. The governor has honored me with a proposal to reappoint me. We're in a pandemic, and as far as I'm concerned, there's a lot of work to be done to keep Vermonters safe and well. And you don't quit on somebody in the middle of that. You stay the course if it is your considered judgment that I'm the person to do that. And so that's my commitment to the people of Vermont.
Okay, committee questions. Senator Hardy and then Senator Brock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Commissioner, for your comments, and I just wanted to say, well, I have a question and then just a comment, which is that as a new member of this committee, I don't have a long history with you or Commissioner Bolio, who came first before you. So I just, in the 2 months that I've known you, I've appreciated your extending a lot of assistance to me and helping me learn the ropes and answering questions and being a team player when we're trying to figure out our plan for broadband. And so I've really enjoyed working with you. And my question is, one thing I'm still trying to figure out is the relationship between the Department of Public Service and the Public Utilities Commission, and how you work with them and how you see that relationship. If it's, I'm assuming you're going to say it's positive, but maybe not. Like, so, sort of what you think of that and how it's working.
Oh, yes, I do think it's a positive relationship because it's incumbent on us all to do the work that Vermonters need us to do. And we have spheres where we work together, for instance, in regional energy policy. And there are some bodies like the New England Conference of Public Utility Commissioners, NARUC and the like, where we are joint members and represent Vermont. So on that level, it's a very positive relationship. I know the commissioners very well, and it's actually a pleasure to work with them. And that's not always the case in other states. But in terms of the relationship between the department and the PUC, we have one part of our relationship is an advocacy relationship where we are just like any other stakeholder who appears in the PUC proceedings to advocate for a position. In my opinion, of course, we have a special mandate because it is given to the department to advocate for the public interest and for ratepayer interests specifically, and other specific areas. I guess the easiest way to say it is we advocate and they decide. And in order to put them in the best position to decide, I think the department's advocacy mandate is broader than that of a private interest. If you go to court and make an argument before a judge, you're arguing strictly your narrow interests. But the department has a broader role because we're there not just to represent the advocacy piece, say in a rate case on what ratepayers should pay by way of just and reasonable rates. We also have to have our advocacy informed by the energy policies that the state has enacted, because we're also the agency in charge of planning for those things and implementing so many of the policies that you adopt, as are they, but in different ways. So that our advocacy has to encompass many dimensions as opposed to a narrow stakeholders. And when we get into those broader dimensions that we represent before the PUC, I see the department more as a friend of the court, where we are there trying to give a frank and fair evaluation of the data, and also the policy intentions that I take from regularly interacting with you folks in this committee and in HET. We're there to help inform their record so that they can make the best decisions. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it sounds like you find it to be a productive,
Oh,
that
very.
you're working
Yes.
for the same goals. And yeah, I just was unclear as to what your role is versus their role, but I think I understand it better now. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Senator Brock.
Commissioner, as you look back over your time in this position, what are the things that you think have gone particularly well and the accomplishments of which you are particularly proud?
It's, Senator Brock, if the pandemic hadn't happened, I'd probably be answering that question differently. But hands down, the agency's response at the moment of critical need for the people of Vermont during the pandemic, and just the multifaceted things that we've done to help them, whether it was on arrearages or on connectivity, and being able to mobilize that response so quickly and to do that without additional resources, so that what funding was available could go toward helping people as opposed to paying for overhead. And just having been, punched above our weight continually for the last year, I can't say enough about my staff and the outstanding performance that they have brought. And I think, it's fair to say I've had a role in leading them in producing that response. But clearly it's their victory, and I'm very proud of that.
And as you look back, what are your biggest disappointments? And what things might you have done differently in retrospect?
Well, Senator, I think without a doubt, the handling of the telecom plan has not been smooth, to say the least. I can either go over in my mind the wherefores and the whys, or I can do what I have done, which is listen very carefully to this committee and to you specifically, and to take in that feedback and to say, let's get the job done. We're here to serve the people of Vermont. We're not here to expend energy on a tug of war about how well the plan is or is not getting done. And so, at the outset, I don't think I fully understood how deep the concern ran about the prior years leading up to the telecom plan in 2000 and I want to say at this point 2018. And I take responsibility for what happened on my watch. And at this point, my focus has been on going forward and trying to lay to rest those concerns, because our energy needs to be productively engaged. And but I frankly, I've been doing this work since 2001, I think. And to my knowledge, I always had a very collaborative and collegial relationship with the legislature. And it was at the telecom plan juncture that I came to grief and stumbled. And I regret that enormously.
You've obviously been the recipient of an sort of unprecedented barrage of criticism from one citizen advocate who is quite prolific,
Indeed,
to say the least, in his commentary. As you look at all of the allegations and complaints and issues that have been raised, are any of them valid?
Senator, my approach to that critique and any critique has been to read it carefully, listen to it carefully, chase down where the element of truth is, try to tease that out and address it to the extent that I can, or if in my judgment it's so warranted. That critic is not alone. So yes, I think there are things that are valid about it. And that's what my focus has been on. That's a reflection of the many years I spent as a hearing officer, where, you don't judge anything on the basis of whether you like it or not. You judge on the basis of whether it serves the people or not. That's my view. And so that critic is very energetic. I think at times it has been a strain to keep up with all of the responses that we've had to make, but I take I take it very seriously. I'm a child of the 1970s, and government in the sunshine is everything to me. And so when somebody is trying to access the information they need in order to make their point that I could be doing a better job, my job is to get them access to that information. And I've always been committed to doing that. So yeah, I hope I've answered your question. I do take those things seriously that I can find value in, and I don't write the person off.
Well, as you look at many of those things and issues that have been raised, we now have bills both from the House and the Senate that would do some reorganization and create an entity to deal particularly with the broadband and cellular issue. But those things aren't in law right now. And of course, there's no guarantee that they ever will be. And so if you were to continue in the role and had those responsibilities continuing, what would you do differently than what you're doing now?
That is a very good question, Senator Brock. I think I would be coming, well, okay, you asked me what I would do differently from what I'm doing now. I really have to think, yeah, I have to think hard about that because the things we are doing now, I think have been effective for the pandemic. And that is what we will be doing in the foreseeable future. And I think you may be aware that I've provided both this committee and House Energy Technology a description of a fund mechanism that I would be administering at the department if we had sizable funding coming in. And I would assume that it's the same people that I have now on staff who I would be tasking with doing that work. That fund might be different in that we would have an advisory board that's similar to the VCAB, helping us with the decisions about where to invest grant money, for instance, for connectivity initiative projects. But I think I am in the, Senator, to be frank with you, I think I would continue doing what I'm doing with, every ear open to the feedback that I receive from this committee, from House Energy Technology, from the governor, and from the input of the public when, for instance, we're at public hearings to get the job done. Does that answer your question?
Well, I guess one of the things I was really looking for is the strategy that we are undertaking currently for extending broadband and meeting the requirements and the goals. Is that the correct strategy, or should there be a strategic realignment to ensure that all of the various pieces and components that we have of that effort are aligned either differently or better?
I think my view of that is we have to pay attention to timing at this point. What we have immediately at hand is federal funding that is directed at dealing with connectivity, specifically broadband. And my agency's task, for better or for worse, is to be the agency through which this government, the state government, administers funding of that nature and makes progress on that nature. So without full jurisdiction over the entities in the market and whatnot, but with the supervisory relationships that we have with the CUDs, our task is to get that done. That is a huge task, huge. And on top of that come the other components that you're talking about, wireless technology, for instance, for cell service, or the E911 considerations that you've pointed to in the past, bearing in mind that is a function of yet a different agency. So I would have to say to you, if you do not succeed in standing up one of those two vehicles, my agency will continue to try to be both the Department of Public Service for regulated telecommunications and the Department of Public Service that is the agent for the state of Vermont on broadband policy, recognizing that we don't have good regulatory authority to get that job done, but we do what we can within those limitations. And then also the continuing role that we play in cross-communicating, cross-coordinating state government with agencies that have other pieces of the portfolio that you've very frequently spoken of consolidating into one. So in terms of strategy and realignment, I wish I could tell you, yes, we should have a comprehensive realignment and have it all organized to our satisfaction. I just don't think that that's a job the department can do by itself. And given how much of that lives outside of the purview of my department, whether under federal regulation or in the portfolios of other agencies, I think it is a mistake to think that the first step is for the department to come up with that comprehensive structure. I just don't think that's appropriate.
Well, I guess what I'm really asking is if we create these other agencies that presumably they are tasked to do these things, and as indicated in the various bills, and if those don't come about, the need to do those things still exists. And the question is, what would you do in terms of if there is a need for a different skill set, for more intensive work, for a different focus, for different people who have the skills necessary to do what needs to be done, what would you do?
Well, I think my answers are not giving you satisfaction, Senator Brock. We will do the best we can with what we have been doing. And it will be with the staff that I have, who I very firmly stand behind. And I would repeat that the mandate for the department legally and funding wise is much narrower than the job that you're describing. We are not situated to be the architects of an agency that integrates E911 and transportation rights of ways and cell service that's regulated by the federal government and broadband service and deployment that is regulated by the federal government. We do everything that we can on those topics with what we have. But I think the fact that you have 2 bills in the hopper is probably the clearest indication that the job is much bigger and far in excess of the resources my agency has.
Do you
So
think
I
it's
would-
your
I would
responsibility,
continue.
though, to ask for the resources necessary to do a job that you perceive may need to be done? Or do you believe that that is a responsibility that lies outside of your agency and elsewhere in government?
Well, Senator, I have gone out of my way, especially in this session, to be a partner to the legislature in having that conversation about what such an entity should look like. Because you phrased it in terms of, is it my responsibility or not? And frankly, the way I see it is there's a need, and you folks are reaching to meet that need, and I am reaching to help you with that need. Is it my responsibility? If it doesn't really matter. We're doing that work together because we recognize that there is a need to do something different from what we have been doing. You have more than once referred in public conversation to that conflict that the department experiences between being the regulator and being the promoter, if you will, on broadband. Is it my responsibility to bring that to your attention? I have treated it that way. I have been in front of you testifying to that effect. Is it my responsibility to solve that problem without your help? No, I can't. That's really where you come in. And I hope that I have given satisfaction in supporting you in those endeavors.
Thank you very much.
Senator Pearson, and we're running
Yeah, no,
short on time here.
I just wanted to make the comment that the commissioner's not hired to run the agency she wished she had. So that seems to me to be a separate discussion.
Commissioner, how many people do you have in the department, and how many are dedicated to broadband?
I have 48 people or 48 positions in the department. We have 2 vacancies right now. And I have a director and 4 staff. One is dedicated to broadband, the rural technical specialist, whose position was created in 2019. The others actually are not broadband resources. And we are specially funded through the gross receipts tax on regulated utilities. And in the telecom sector, the regulated utilities are those that provide landline telephone service and cable service, neither one of which is broadband. So we've been doing an awful lot of work in the broadband space, but we don't have a mandate regulatorily or financially to do it.
Okay. Senator Bray.
Thank you, Commissioner Tierney. I wanted to follow up on one thing, sort of a question sort of halfway between what Senator Brock's line of inquiry and Senator Pearson's reasonable imply that you can't run the agency, an agency you don't have, but I was on the committee 6 years ago when we passed the 100 megabit per second symmetrical service standard. And it does seem to me like I maybe this is 2020 hindsight, but I'm not sure that my impression is the department didn't come to the legislature and said, you're not equipping us to make reasonable progress towards that standard without, X, Y, or Z, additional resources. So I do feel like it has languished some, and every administration has their own point of view of whether or not they want to ask for additional resources or not. And I suppose all I'm saying is that when we're asking for things that the current level of commitment, financially, personnel-wise, et cetera, can't produce, then I think it's helpful for an operating area to say, this is an unrealistic expectation, and here's what we can do, and here's what we can't, and then lay it at our feet to either step up with more money and resource or not. I know that we've asked ANR to do that on water quality work, for instance. Everyone wants more water quality, like everyone wants more bandwidth. But we've pushed them to say, if we're going to get there in the time frame that you're asking for, here's what we need. And that provided the basis for the legislature to actually commit more funds and support hiring both at ANR and at Agency of Agriculture. So I just offer up that perspective of having looked at two long-term issues that are not easy to solve.
Okay. Sandra, is there a question in there?
No, no.
Okay. With that, we have cut into break. I want to thank the commissioner and thank you, committee. We are back at 3:00. Commissioner, we're not doing any voting today. We were just doing an interview. So
thank you, Madam Chair. And should you vote me down, just let me say it was a pleasure, and I respect your judgment, of course. And
Okay,
I'll be
thank
back
you.
until I'm kicked out of office. I'll be back.
Okay.
All right.
All right, committee.
Thank you, Commissioner.
You're out until 3. And then we're going to do tips